back on this rainy evening and hope you enjoy it. We're going to pass with some of the formalities of what we do with who we are and what we do to get right at the questions, because it's been quite a lengthy process, and apparently we have an awful lot of questions and answers that we want to do. So first of all, I want to introduce to you who's on the panel this evening, and I'll start with Frank Fink, our only gentleman that's on the panel. He's been a member of Kent Branch since the founding practically, and he is quite involved with research and so on throughout our Kent Branch genealogy. He was also our newsletter editor for a number of years. So he brings a lot of knowledge this evening, so I hope he's able to answer some of these questions. The next person is Shirley Strudeman. She's our past president of the Ontario Genealogy Society, and she has a lot of interest in our Kent Branch and what's going on within our area. She's also had many hats that she's worn at the provincial office, and we welcome her this evening. Donna Kofel is Donna Dixon. She's married again, and she's gone from Donna Kofel to Donna Kofel Dixon to Donna Dixon. So. Anyway, Donna's been with the Kent Branch for a number of years as well, and probably between all of them, they probably got pushing 100 years of information stored in their heads. So she's does some specialty workshops in registration land and so on. So she has a lot of multiple people that can help with questions. Valerie Butterfield is also, she's our treasurer at our Kent Branch, and she brings a lot of wealth of information as well. She's been a chair member at our branch as well as a long time research person, and she does our research for our Kent Branch Genealogy Society. So we'll go from there. Our meetings are being live streamed this evening, so as you know, if you don't want to be on camera and just want to talk, stay away from the video camera and just go to the mic. And these are our events of interest that we're having. We're going to, for the first time, we're going to tour the McGeorge building with their records. It's September 24th, which is Monday, or 14th, I'm sorry. And if you're a Kent member, it's free, and if you're not, it's a toonie. It's just a little gratuitous thing for us setting it up and doing the work. Also, we have the Wallaceburg Dresden Senior Fair, September 18th. It's from 10 to 2, and it's in the Dresden Arena. Hope to see you all there, because we'll have a table there representing our Kent Branch. Then we're going to tour the registry building on October 27th at 10 a.m. Once again, Kent members are free, and non-members are paying a toonie. So we're hoping that you sign up for all this, because I think they'll both be a very interesting and informative tour that we're going to have in both these tours. The upcoming events for our general meetings on Friday night is October 9th. It's a Stitch in Time, and the Chatham Kent Quilters will tell us about the Thames River Barn quilt trails from 1750 to 1850 is represented on the quilt. November 13th is Where There Is a Will, and Deborah Honor from the Essex Ranch will discuss the importance of ancestors' wills and how to locate them easily. So now we'll begin with our questions and answers. So, and Lynn wants to, I'm sorry, I forgot, Lynn's put up his hand, he wants to talk about something here, so, and it was, yes.
In this current issue of our publication, there is a request for searching Stokes in Chatham. And I did a little bit of looking this evening after supper time. Obviously, this person hasn't gone through Ancestry.ca because there were a number of families who have written their history, and also the Ontario Cemetery Finding Aid. Has anybody seen this or done any research on it? I'm at the library. I'm volunteer at the library tomorrow. I can probably be doing some more research and getting back to this guy, but certainly there are a number of things on Ancestry.ca, and the ancestor here to be talking about was buried in the Glenham Cemetery, and I guess a number of the family as well. So I can certainly look up some of the things that may be at our library when I'm on duty tomorrow. If anybody else, though, has anything else or are aware, there are 4 pictures in here from Chatham photographers. If any of you recognize any of the family, would appreciate knowing that, or if you haven't looked at this already. So this is Stokes family. So, okay, so if you have anything, please let me know tonight, and or see me at the library tomorrow afternoon.
One other thing before we start, we have to, calendar wasn't brought this evening for people to sign up, so please go up to the library and sign your names for volunteer days. We desperately need some people up there to do that, so please don't forget to support it and go up and give your name for Diane. Donna, did you have something you want to say now, or was it later?
I have to go and get, it's OGS books. I have to announce, I can announce it later.
Okay, okay. Okay, so let's begin with our questions, which is the first one. And where would I look for land records for Dover Township and Chatham Township, as well as the city of Chatham? Is there info at the Kent OGS Library, or do I need to go elsewhere? Who would like to start? Donna?
The land records prior to 1970 are in microfilm reels at the Kent Registry Office. Records for the township are accessed by consulting a microfilm land abstracts and then the actual microfilm documents. Chatham land records and other towns and villages are arranged by plan number after the lots and concessions were annexed and divided into lots. The townships are by lot and concession number, so if you only have a 911 number, you're going to have to go back to the 1881 atlas and figure out what the lot and concession would be. This availability in a microfilm at the land registry office may change in the future, and the records after 1970 will only be available online by computer, and the ones in the microfilm we don't know if they would be transferred somewhere else. But if you're searching land records, this book is invaluable. It's Brenda Merriman's Genealogy in Ontario, Searching the Records. And this is the one book that can give you a real good idea of the different kinds of land patents and the grants and the process that they went through. Just one other thing I want to mention, if you're going to a land registry office to search, bear in mind that the staff is there primarily for land document registration, not for genealogical research. And particularly around the times of the month when the land transaction, or the lawyers come in or their helpers come in to register them, they are really busy. So kind of not go around the first 30th, the first, and around the middle of the month.
We've got more. We'll give you the lines.
All right,
We're looking at the team.
remember,
Took too much to remember somebody's name a while ago, so we can do it. Just wanted to add to not just the actual records, but other materials are available within the municipality. For example, the McGeorge building that Linda has arranged the tour of over just off Grand Ave, if you know where the water treatment plant is. That's where the McGeorge building is, and they have the actual land abstract books there, and I actually called over this morning to make sure they were still there and were still accessible, and so we'll get a chance to see those and lots of other records that they have. But in one of the binders at the front, I actually brought some samples, and so I had made arrangements to go in and view the books that I wanted to see. And then they were busy that day, so they couldn't photocopy things for me right away, but if I was willing to wait and come back a little bit later, they did. So, I mean, that entire binder has been photocopied at some point in time by people who were willing to actually copy the land abstract books so you could see the actual transactions, and you can see samples of those there. And I believe in our own Kent OGS library, and again, not the actual records, but we do have the land petition books. So that when people were petitioning for land way back in the early years when the records began that Don was telling you about, those land petition books are there. The microforms to use with that, not the microfilms, but there's a micro, they call it microfiche.
Yeah.
The big microfiche reader, I believe it's still back up on top of the filing cabinet there, is that where it is? And there are little kind of rectangular square, they look like little pieces of negative, and they have all the information about finding, locating Crown land patents and other information about Crown land. So don't overlook those. I know that was something that I poured over for quite a while when I was first looking for land information. Also in our library, and I believe it's either the bottom drawer, the second bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, are the Township papers. And they have other miscellaneous papers that go along with the land records that you might be seeking. So don't forget about those either. And they're arranged in microfilms by Township, and then they're arranged by lot and concession after that. So they would have just miscellaneous correspondence. You might actually find wills associated with land, because if things didn't go to probate, they want to avoid the court costs, they might get attached there. Same thing with when you go to the land registry office. When you get looking at what they might have on their microfilm, you might look out and find wills attached to that as well, because people often didn't go the probate route if the heir was rather clear, there was not going to be any argument about who the heir was, then you'd find that information along with the actual registration itself. And even though it looks like the registry offices themselves may not carry these early films, at the moment anyway, the Ontario Archive still does, and FamilySearch.org still does, and you would have to order them in, of course, but still, they're accessible. And that would be another good way to be able to get things if indeed we were in limbo for a while with the land registry offices closing down some of their services. And I actually brought some printouts from some of those that I'll set along the front afterwards too. If you go to Ontario Archives and just see, go under family history records and then look under land, it will give you all the information that you need. And I printed off, as I said, several of the information sheets that would be called pathfinders on there that you might want to know. Anything else to add?
I was looking in the archives online for the petitions, land petitions. It was for Kent and Essex County over the summer, and I found the link. I thought I'd follow it. So you can actually go to the patents. They are online, but it's really it's a real process to dig through it. And I found a couple surprises. I had a name. It was an Essex County person, which is 1790s, early 1800s. They haven't, Kent and Essex are pretty much together when it comes to land patents. But somebody had applied, and he had sworn allegiance to the crown. But just before that, he decided he was still in Detroit with his business. He had sworn allegiance to the Americans. 1796 is when the U.S. takes over Detroit, and the British withdraw to Sandwich or Amherstburg, whatever. In the records, I think Canadians on this side, we call it Evacuation Day or something. One of the two groups calls it Evacuation Day. Anyway, with the connections through the hierarchies at the time, the judges and the lawyers and the deeds, they double-checked his application for patent, and it took a little while. Michigan sent it back to Toronto, sent back to him. Wait a minute, you sworn allegiance to the U.S., and therefore we deny your request for land. And we also, I think he was also, his son was also denied, even though he was living in Sandwich by this point in time. So they did backtrack a little bit. You wouldn't think they would have. But it was quite a surprise, but it is very tedious to walk through the microfilm, or not the microfilms, but the links to the microfilm pages from the Archives of Ontario Patient. It's there, and you can walk through it without going anywhere. You do it from comfort of your own computer. So I did run through the exercise, so I know it is possible.
I did it.
Yeah.
Question number 2. Pierce commemorative biographical record. Mr. George Pierce was first married in Delaware, Ontario, March 27, 1877, to a Miss Maggie Hewson of Lambton County. daughter of John Hewson. She died March 27, 1881, aged 27 years and 8 months, leaving one son, William. Mr. George Pierce was my grandmother's uncle on my father's side. I am looking to determine whether Maggie's father was related to George and Hannah Hewson or his uncle James Houston. What should the next steps be? Suggestions would be appreciated.
Do not believe beers. It's probably the most inaccurate book in the county. That's all I'm gonna say, because Diane French is not here to correct me, because I put together something that she was very familiar with on her family lines, based on what I found in beers. And then she came back and gave me the information based on her family research. And the two were way out completely. So the warning is beware of beers. It's a carefully edited, or it's to the best of the memory of the people writing it and submitting it, which, without doing a lot of particular family tree research at the time when it came out, you paid to put your family tree in it. All the good stuff is left out. It's very sanitized and edited. So beware of beers.
But use the bill.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because there are some good histories in there.
For starters, you use it, but beware of it. It's not as accurate as you may think.
They were embellishing or deleting at will, so they wrote their own.
In answer to this question, I would suggest that you start looking at newspapers. If you have the death date, and even the marriage date, I'm not sure true newspaper would be back then. That has been a wonderful source for me. I just found, I found the relatives of my Irish roving ancestors that came to the United States in 1840 through newspapers. And I just received a notice of marriage from 1855 from Rochester, New York. So I would suggest that you try, and it's tedious again. If it's not indexed, you have to go by the dates. But you can get those clues from the Ontario death, birth, marriage registrations. Sometimes there's even family reunions. So that would be the one thing. And the other thing is find out everything you can about every relative that might have some information about your ancestor. Again, that has been wonderful. And when I was doing my petitions, I found, instead of looking at my ancestor, I looked at all the brothers and sisters, and lo and behold, along with one of the brothers was a marriage certificate contract, and it said where they were married, when their kids were born, and what dates they were born. So, you really have to go all around in order maybe to find that one little tidbit that leads you to the information you want.
Right, collateral research, looking at everybody. Is the writer of this question actually here?
They sent them in.
Okay, they might be online listening. Okay, good. So we want to find out Maggie's father, and whether Maggie's father was related to George and Hannah or his uncle James Houston, and I wasn't sure who his was. So I would have a couple of questions for the person asking this particular question. Was Mr. Pierce an uncle of the client's grandmother on her father's side, through her great-great-grandfather, or her great-great-grandmother? And how does the client know this? So what documentation does she or he have that states that this particular person was related in that way? And I was curious to know how George and Hannah Hewson are related to the person submitting the question, or to Maggie herself. Now, Maggie's name is Margaret, by the way. And as I said, to whom does the term "is" relate? So I started to think about how I would go about this. And first of all, I would try and confirm the marriage information, which I wasn't able to do. Of course, I only went online. I didn't have time to go searching through our own records and go and contact Middlesex or Lambton counties for this information, but I was not able to find a marriage record. So perhaps that person's already found it, and that would give some additional information, perhaps as to names of parents or the place of the, it says they were married in Delaware, but is that accurate? Because we all know, as we've heard, one beer is enough, but two might be too many. What was their stated religion? Where was their place of residence? All clues for where we might start looking. And then seek the actual death records for both Maggie and George. And I did actually go and find the death record for Maggie, whose name was Margaret. And I'll tell you about that in a second. That way you can confirm the place of residence at the time of death, or maybe other related facts again, such as parents, do the names match the other information that we saw? Are their nicknames used? How are we going to identify these people when we get looking at other records to know that this is the same family? Again, looking at places and dates of birth, place of burial, informant. Sometimes it's a spouse, sometimes it's another relative. All of those names we might watch for when we're looking through other records or newspaper articles and directories, all the kinds of places we might look. I also wanted to find out whether or not there were any other children for Margaret. Did she die in childbirth? It says she left behind a son, but was that son born at the time of this, of her death? So what else might we be able to find? And in those records of that child or other children, might we find other information about her or her husband and how they might be connected to these particular people in question, that George and Hannah or uncle. And then I wanted to seek the birth record for William, as I said, because his mother might have information on that as well. So then using the identifying factors from the families, you could go back and look at the 1881 census and then the 1871 census for the local areas, trying to find families that fit some of those particular features. And as Dawn mentioned, going through collateral lines, looking at brothers and sisters, and thank you, aunts and uncles, you might be able to find then more information that will help you determine which line happens to be yours. The information that I was able to find, thank you, I always sound like this. And then, and again, the questioner may have already found this, but I found the birth record for William, born William Emery Pierce, 18 July 1878. Well, that's not the same as the death record, the death date that we were given, wasn't. But she also had another child, unfortunately stillborn, a daughter. And it was 4 months after, 4 weeks after her birth that she died. But again, from that information, we were able to find out where they were living at the time, able to find out that she was 27 years old, 12 months and 8 days old, according to her informant. The name of the informant was given. The informant was from Petrolia, so was that person particularly related to them or a close friend of any kind, which might show up again in newspaper records. She or her family declared that she was of the Canada Methodist faith, and it mentioned that George was an engineer. So that might help in looking back and following some of the census to know whether or not we've got the right family or not. So now we're talking about George and Margaret. He's an engineer. So again, looking through those kinds of things, beginning to look at available censuses, directories, church records, going back to the lines in question, and I too mentioned the historic newspapers, which often provide lots of leads or support the facts that you found someplace else.
Okay, question number 3. After visiting the grave site of an ancestor in 1846, whose worn and fragile tombstone had broken in two, my question is with regards to the expense and time, effort, and dollars in preservation or full restoration of such broken, deteriorated headstones, as well as the approval process, if any are permitted, when the churchyard is under the auspices of the Church of Province, in my case, the Anglican Church.
What is the question?
Well, the only thing that I was able to do, because I'm Anglican, was I looked up the Diocese of Huron, which is located in London, Ontario. I can give you there's a web page with directions on how to get there on Western Road. The 1-800 number is 1-800-919-1115. And the other number is 519-434-6893. And the diocese is located at 190 Queen Avenue in London. Postal code N6A6H7. So if that's any help to the person who's seeking, I don't know if there's any other things I could do. Do you have any comments on it, Donna?
I was just going to say that the burial records, I guess they're there, but other than the tombstone, there may not be many other burial records available. In Chatham, Kent, we've been very lucky to have the cemetery group who's been going around and they've been able to, work with some of the tombstones, put them upright and fix them. The thing is that for cemetery plots, they're owned by individuals. And the problem is that if they aren't willed to the next person, then you don't know who owns them. So the cemetery board would be the person, or in the case of the church. If they are willed, it gets to be a whole real kettle of fish, because then you have to find out if the person will give you permission. They may be in California, and then you have to, that's yours. I just picked that. And then you have to go to the lawyer, and he has to ascertain if those people really have the rights to that plot. So, in the case of the old tombstones, if they have broken, sometimes they can put a steel plate in behind there. And it's one of those areas, gray areas that, and in my particular case, my ancestors my cousin owns it, and we'd like to do something with it, but we never gotten permission to do it, and it's kind of gone by the board. So that's.
Yes, it's been a long process for this California deal. I've been working since April to try and have an interment done in the family plot, and I'm the only natural heir to my mother, but she had a sister, and they're now waiting for I'm waiting for them to sign the papers to release their ownership to it so that I can have sole ownership, since they've been in California since the 1940s, and they're not coming back here to be buried. So that's where it can really run into some issues. Yeah. Anything?
If you know how to fix it yourself, you wait till the dead of the night, and then you go in and do it yourself. You don't tell anybody.
I have been suggested to do that, but I just can't do it. It's just not what I could do. Question number 4. Oh, okay, sorry.
So the registrars.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I thought, who else would have answered this question but the registrar? So I called my friend Michael, who wasn't in his office. But I spoke to Nicole Hansen at the registrar's office, who's responsible for Ontario cemeteries. And she gave me some notes that I've written down, but it's probably better that I just read it directly from here. And I got a few copies of this if anybody wants them. Key messages. Cemetery operators do not own the markers and the monuments, often called tombstones or headstones, which are erected on graves in the cemetery. Most markers and monuments have been purchased by the interment rights holder and or their relatives, who Donna was talking about. Cemetery operators are responsible for ensuring public safety. So if a marker or monument is unstable or presents a safety risk to the public, the operator must do whatever is required to remove the risk, including repairing, resetting, or laying down the marker or monument. Most markers and monuments are made from stones such as marble and granite, and over time these materials deteriorate from environmental forces such as blah, 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 and may eventually need restoration or repair. A cemetery operator is not obligated to replace, restore, or repair the markers and monuments, but must ensure that any safety concerns are addressed. When a consumer purchases an interment right, that is a grave, lot, crypt, or niche, from a cemetery operator and or installs a marker or monument, a portion of the money from the sale is deposited into a care, and you may already know this, but I'm just reading for some people who don't know. A portion of the sale of that is deposited into a care and maintenance trust fund by the operator. And the capital portion of this fund cannot be used and is intended to build up and generate interest over time. This interest is used by the operator to maintain the cemetery, including the markers and the monuments. So first off, if it's something that the operator can take care of, then they should, which does not sound like the case in this particular instance. The purchaser or owner of the marker or monument may choose to have the marker or monument repaired or restored at their own expense. The cemetery operator may also choose to repair or restore the markers and monuments if they are financially able to, and may use the interest that has been generated by the cemetery's care and maintenance trust to do so. So now, if they don't know who the person is, who has the rights. What's the right spot? So the interment rights holder has the decision-making power, but if there is no such person, they would have to, someone else might be required, or might be allowed to do this. I'm just trying to find my right spot here. There we are. So if the interment rights holder is not known, arrangements might be able to be made with the cemetery owner operator by another individual. So this is different from what Dawn was talking about, different from what Judy was talking about. In Dawn's case, it's a straight, I own it, I get to help make the decisions about what happens to it. In your case, you don't own it, somebody else does, so you're out there.
I was very lucky though that I had the original documents when my great-grandparents bought in 1928-21.
Yeah.
And also I had the will, my great-grandmother's will from 1945.
But it wasn't willed to you,
No, it wasn't.
so we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
Okay. But now, let's say that's an historic cemetery and nobody knows who the rights owner is, who has the rights, or they're not alive. And apparently, the registrar and the powers that be are making arrangements for people who wish to make those changes and improvements to do so. They might be able to make arrangements with the cemetery owner operator. And if they agree to do that, they, meaning the operator of the cemetery, agrees to do that, they have bylaws that must be followed, and each cemetery or cemetery board might have different bylaws, so you must not just make assumptions. For example, this particular cemetery might not allow anything with a cross on it. All you want to do is put up a simple little cross to mark the resting place of this uncle or whoever, a great who died way back. And so you wouldn't be allowed to do that. So if indeed no one can be found to be the person who owns the rights to this lot, if a person is willing to go into the cemetery board and speak to them and make possible suggestion that they would, or maybe the cemetery has monies that they would help do that as well, they need to get in writing who will be responsible for what and who will pay for what, not just go in and say, well, you allow me to do that, yes, go ahead, dear, and then have somebody come back later and discover that there was something on the rights, and now you're the one in trouble because the cemetery doesn't have any paperwork that says you're going to do that. So make sure you get it in writing, and do make sure that whatever it is you decide to do, you clear with the cemetery and the cemetery board and their bylaws, because if you are outside the bylaws, then you are possibly liable and will be charged in some way.
Does anyone have any questions in the audience that they'd like to ask at this time? Is there anyone that has any questions that they want to ask or have thought about? Okay, then we'll move on to number 4.
Judy, before you move on to number 4, Elizabeth appreciated all the comments from number 2. She's online and she's listening. She said, thank you very much.
That's great. Question number 4, Kent County Church records, what is available and where? Who's gonna, if you want to talk about it? Well, just the Anglican Church, our church records for the Huron Diocese. I'm a member of one of the Anglican churches here in Chatham. And we have, like I said before, the Diocese of Huron, which is located at 190 Queen Avenue in London. And they have all our documents from our birth, marriage, deaths down there. And they have a 1-800 number as well that they can call if they're interested, and they'll give them the hours that they're open and so on. I've never been to it. I've been meaning to get there, but I just haven't. But I can give you the numbers again. It's 1-800-919-1115 or 519-434-6893, and they're located at 190 Queen Avenue, London, Ontario, N6A6H7. So, and they also have a web page if you want to go to the Diocese of Huron, and it'll come up with the web page and directions and so on. So that's for that church. I can help you. I don't know too much about the other churches, but I'm thinking they do the same thing possibly.
The Ontario Archive does have some Kent County Church Records. And the other place for United Church, one of the places is United Church Archives in Toronto. There's also Presbyterian Church Archives, those are the only two I know about. In the case of United Church, check with the local churches. There's a presbytery or regional offices, check with those and see if anyone knows where they are. I know in the case of Park Street and St. Andrews that the records are still at the local church. And we have published some church records on our publication, so check that out on our website.
Could I speak about the Roman Catholic Church? The records are available from early on to, sometimes you'll get them right up to last year, depending on what issue of the book you get. But for the most part, these records are by diocese, by town, by city, and most of them are in French. You can access some of them on Ancestry, but they come through Drouin and Tanguay and Jeté, but those are old. Those are the old ones. But if you want to come up, when we had the library in Puce, you could go there. They've got them all in book form, but they're closed at the moment. The director is apparently very ill, and everything has been removed from the place where they were because the building's been sold, and they're looking for something else that they can afford to move into. So you have to practically join the group, and they are all online if you belong to the French History Society. So, and it's cheap. It's really cheap to join, and you can look at the books yourself online. It's really worth it. But those are the Roman Catholic records you will find. Like I found records in 1978 and 1986 in Timmins. So depending on what they've handed in is what you're going to get. But way back from 1600.
Well worth it.
Oh, it
Subscription
is.
too.
Yeah. It's cheap. I just did it and I can't remember how much I paid, but it's under $20.
I was just gonna say, whoops. We have library transcriptions from Pancor, St. Peter's, St. Joseph's, and those are all there. Is that the only ones that we have? Tilbury, that's St. Peter's. Okay.
Well, there are some St. Francis,
Yeah,
but and St. Patrick's, but again, those are old records.
Right.
You're not going to get, into the 60s.
yeah. So you check our library for some of the transcriptions of those Catholic records.
So you mentioned the Anglican Church records. Check out the publications online. There's another advertisement for you. And I'll just put another plug for Family Search and Archives of Ontario. If you go to Family Search, you go up to the search drop-down menu and go on catalog, and it will come up. And if you type in place, to start with the biggest, start with Canada, Ontario, Kent, and it just gave me a list of the kinds of things that it has available for our particular county. Of course, it was at that point in time. And it mentions all the places that they have something for example, Lindsley, pardon me. I don't even know where Lindsley is, and I didn't. Cedar Springs, Clatchin, Fairfield. And then it lists, for example, there are 2 entries for biographies, 3 for church history, 13 for church records. So then you can click on those and it will let you know what they have and what's available and whether it's available online or whether you can find it by getting it brought into your local family history center so that you can view them. And the Archives of Ontario too have all kinds of descriptors on how to use their services. And I'll leave these up here for you to take a look at, but it talks about their description of their records, what they are, where they've got them, what microfilm numbers they are. It also, in another document, gives you a list of all the the church diocese, for example, the Huron diocese that you were talking about, for all the faiths, and there would be contact information there for them so that you can go ahead and find that. So again, just go onto the website for Ontario Archives, click Family History, click Records, and then just scroll down until you find church records, and you'll find the information all there for you to take a look at. So they're still very helpful. I know we often want to go to other websites, especially the ones we want to pay for. What's with that? But Ontario Archives is free, so is Family Search, and they still have lots available.
Okay, we have a
We have a question from Stuart Wellington that is online with us. And he says, in August 1892, there was a train accident near Fletcher on the NCR, which claimed the life of John Hawkins. Funeral was held at Hawkins' residence in Fletcher, then to Methodist Church, he has in brackets, presumably in Berlin, then to Smith Mills Cemetery. Where would that be?
Fletcher has a United Church, so it probably was the Methodist Church we were talking about.
That's what he said, the Methodist Church.
He said probably in Berlin.
Oh,
Fletcher has a church.
Fletcher does have a church, okay. Do you want to?
Oh, I was just gonna say Fletcher does have a church, which is a United Church in Canada now, so that may have been a Methodist church. I really don't know. Maybe you could send a query to Kent Branch and we can maybe try and find out for you.
Okay, thank you.
And remember too, as was just pointed out with this particular question, that many of the churches have changed names over the time and amalgamated and re-amalgamated and realigned and split and done whatever. So looking at sites on the web or in books about church histories will be important for trying to find out where the records might be, because of course it might be a United Church now, but you know, the United Church might then have the Methodist Church records, but some of the Methodists went with the Presbyterians, so you might want to be checking that out. And this is not necessarily related to churches, but I know that my colleague had another point one day, and then we'll give it back to Don.
Well, churches, we could talk a lot on churches and amalgamations, and churches closing, other ones opening. The very basics of all of this, we probably should have mentioned it right at the beginning. And I steered a couple of people towards it who were just starting off, they didn't know where to look. And everyone has a computer. I recommend that you check into our Facebook page for Kent Branch and then expand from there, look at Lambton, look at the outlying areas where you think your relatives have come. And I know of two people who've not joined the branch, but they've had phenomenal networking luck by putting your query on the Facebook page, joining the Facebook page. And that seems to be where the trend is heading. And they keyed in a whole line of families and people that were doing the same research that had the missing information. So they had great success, and they actually took a minute to email me and say, yes, we connected. So there are 2 success stories on using the Facebook page on very little bit. I've advised somebody to do it. And I'm not in the mainstream branch. So it was just off the top, right? Go to the branch, go to the Kent Branch Facebook page and try networking that way. I believe networking was the big topic when we first started in the 70s. We said networking is how you start.
I'm the newbie here. These people have been members of the branches for a long time, but I remember at one point in time, we were trying to promote the branch.
Yes.
And we were trying to make flyers and bulletin boards and whatever, and I was asking people, you know, why would people join OGS? And I think it was Joan Griffin, who said to me, the networking, dear, the networking. And a lot of times people now lose sight of that. If they don't need a branch. It's all online, you know. I can find it at 2 o'clock in the morning in my jam meets. Well, no, you can't find it all, and you don't know what to do with it necessarily, and you don't know you've got the right line and all kinds of things, reasons for networking, and now there are myriad ways to network.
A couple of comments. First of all, what's online? If you take an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is what is online. And I'm going to put a plug in for conference, because sometimes you get the best connections at conference. I got, met up the lady and she sent me a newspaper article on this, Andrew Vance, who's buried under some subdivision up in Uxbridge, you know. She sent me the newspaper article, didn't cost me anything, just from networking. Just to address the question. Church record, the one you had specifically, was on, yeah, thank you. We got kind of off track here. I was just gonna say, Czech community histories, they quite often will have the history of the church. But our own Camp Branch member, Gordon Dixon, has been working on a project for a number of years tracing churches which have closed, amalgamated, and there's a copy of that on our one computer that we just when you go in the door, there's a copy of that, all that information. What do you have under on there? It's under places of worship, and it's right on when you come up with the page, just click on that, and it's like a lot, scans of information, and I can tell you he's still at it.
Did the person want to ask something about Smith
Mills, is that?
Wants to know where that was.
Okay, I don't know where it is, but in our library, and I've got notes from another question here. There's a book called Place Names of Ontario. Place Names of Ontario, and it will tell you where places are, what they used to be named, possibly give you their latitude and longitude. There's a website called the Geographical Names Board of Canada. And if you go to that and type in the name of the place that you're looking for, it should come up as either the current name or a previous name, and then it should give you a little bit of history of the name changes. So that's either the book, The Place Names of Ontario, or the Canadian, the Geographical Names Board of Canada. If you just Google that, you'll be able to find that.
The name of the cemetery may not be what is in the obituary. For instance, Battertown Cemetery is actually Victoria Cemetery. We're still looking for a place called Jubilee Church out near Croton. I've never found, that's where the guy was supposed to be buried from. So bear that in mind. It may be a local term for the cemetery, and that may not be the actual name, or it may have changed or whatever.
The other thing you might do is look for historical atlases online and just type, historic maps, Ontario historic maps, and county, whatever, and a lot of them will come up. I've been doing a presentation about maps and geography for genealogy, and it's just amazing what you can find just by Googling, and or whatever your current web browser is. I shouldn't always advertise Google, I guess, but you can find a lot of things related to maps and geography online.
Question number 5. What are some insights, tips, and recommendations a person might not be aware of when considering titles for publishing their family histories? How family histories are cataloged, for example. I submitted ours to the OGS branches in the provincial office, which didn't reference a family name. It struck me that while viewing county resource lists on your website, that our family history may have less opportunity to be referred to, seen, or discovered by visitors, as the title is Hallowed Ground, Our Canadian Family History.
Well, this question is right up my alley because I'm the co-librarian and I do a lot of the cataloging of the oddball stuff. Also, in my past life, I was a library technician and I specialized in cataloging and reference for my work experience. So I'm going to answer this from the view of a cataloger. Yes, absolutely. A family history with at least the main names in the title or subtitle would be very helpful. For instance, if you had my Irish Roman family is the title, and you put the Hutchisons, the Jamesons, the Downeys, sort of thing, that will come up in the title just without putting subject headings with it. cataloging genealogical material with no title page sometimes, no compiler, no author, no publishing date or place, no responsibility, no paging. It's extremely frustrating. So if I don't get it quite right, I apologize. Sometimes I've had to give a title to something just in order to be able to have a reference and catalog it. Another thing, at Kent Branch Library, we generally only catalog material that applies to Kent County, the surrounding counties around it, family histories, and genealogical source books. So our items from outside Ontario generally will not be cataloged unless it's on a specific, searching for specific nationality. For instance, researching Flemish research or something like that. And those are generally how-to books. They're not generally. The other exception to that was some of our French books. And as for references on our webpage, what you saw there was a report that's been put on the webpage by title in order to get something up on the webpage. We have been limited by about getting things on the webpage and our members on it because this technology is just going so fast. And we've had some problems, not problems, but we've been limited by our we're all volunteers. And we've also been limited by the technological knowledge that's needed to put things on our webpage, to our members only, and to keep things updated. I just have a new updated genealogy program. And so the plan for the future is to do subject reports. So that on the webpage, you would have a subject report on Howard Township. The family histories, hopefully we can put some of the subjects in. We do, when we catalog family histories, we do put family names in as much as we can, but you can't put all of them. After you get about 6 or 7 subject headings, it gets really unwieldy. So, the only thing to do is to maybe send a query and have someone look it up for you.
Judy? No, this is a suggestion from the online too, that I wrote
On the Hawkins,
the previous question.
the previous question that we had, yes. This is for Stuart Wellington. It's, you're going to think of it, but looking John Hawkins within the Ontario Cemetery Finding Aid may be of some help as well. And this is from one of our other members, Elizabeth Beckman. So that may be of some help too. It's called OCFA, Ontario Cemetery Finding Aid. So the next question is, my ancestor, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Wheatley, was located in the Talbot settlement by the Colonel Talbot. We have a copy of a location ticket, a receipt, and a sworn affidavit administered by Colonel Thomas Talbot. Changes in place names are confusing. Does Kent County OGS have a good local resource?
Right straight to me, are you? Yeah. Okay, so you just start with that first question, right? Because it's more than that. Okay, so we do have, yes, the township papers exhibit. So if I also mention those place names, this doesn't like me, does it? It's not the first thing that didn't like me, or the first person wrong. There's also a book called, depends on what you're looking for as far as place names go. A book called The Townships of the Province of Ontario, Canada, and it's a complete index of the townships in all the counties and districts, and it has their current name as well as what their previous name was, with maps to go along with it. So if you're looking at something like townships, then a book of that nature, which is available, strangely enough, through the Ontario Genealogical Society's e-store, studying in England. That helps with that type of, I mentioned the township papers again, would have that information, a lot of it in them. The old or current gazetteers, which have the places named and listed alphabetically, might be helpful. The place names book that I mentioned by Alan Rayburn, there's a 1997 copy in our particular library. The Geographical Names Board of Canada website that I mentioned, the Historical Atlases, and the Genealogy on Ontario, Searching the Records by Brent Dougal Merriman, which is the book that Don and I keep waving around, is certainly extremely helpful in identifying place names and helping with the types of things in this particular question. Donna, I'm going to fill time unless one of you wants to add something, because Donna's just going to grab some other information.
No, you go ahead, this for another question.
Okay. Okay, anything else about place names and local resources?
No, I'm trying to tell that we're talking about, because he's kind of an eccentric character at the time that he's operating. He was known to change things around on people, simply because he found somebody he liked better.
Yeah, I have one. I can talk the archives.
Yeah, Colonel Talbot is a person that you really have to look closely at as a character in history, because he's very eccentric and a lot of people really didn't like him very much, but he did pull switches on location tickets, so that is a caution you want to be aware of.
Just as I'm passing this by, information about land grants and all of these types of tickets and other paperwork could be filed in 13 different places.
I was gonna say, I went to the Ontario Archives, and up on it, went up on the, it was the third or fourth floor, they have the maps. So I had gotten a hold of them ahead of time, so I went up to find out, see if they could get a map with Philip Copel on it, who had settled in lot 172 in Gilbert Township. And they sent it to me afterwards, and you could see on that map, when we looked at it at the archives, where they had rubbed somebody else out and put his name in. And it was really interesting. I was just gonna say, the book Genealogy in Ontario too does give you information on some of the different kinds of land grants. And also the Ontario Archives will have information, and our National Archives in Ottawa will also give you some information on maybe what they were entitled to, and why so many people were granted, 2,000 or more acres, and then never settled on the land.
Ontario has a large, this part of southern Ontario, when the early period, 1790s to maybe 1820, was looking at us on books at the museum, the county museum, based on that over the summer. And there is a lot of land speculation happening, and I think a lot of people are not aware that it wasn't all just handed out nicely. People who deserved something, it was a good old boys club, and land speculation was rampant.
Helen has something.
If I'm understanding that question, it talks about changes in place names. Colonel Talbot settled a number of people in Euphemia Township, which is now in Lambton County. But at that time, it was called Zone, and then it got divided. So part of it is in Kent County, and part was it was called Euphemia. So the boundaries could have changed too, which I think that's what she's asking.
That's one of the things when you're talking about townships that look like this one with the actual place names and that's different townships. That's a very different thing.
Okay, this is question 6 continued. Joseph petitioned Talbot for land in Howard in 1816. It appears in the Commissioner of Crown Lands, Don Township, 1830, but he died prematurely before fulfilling settlement duties. Is there a military resource to explain how much land veterans of that era depending on the rank, length of service, were entitled to? What additional resources and advice might Kent County OGS have for someone exploring settlement of the county 1815 to 1850? Where can Kent County will be located? Any tips?
The records of the land office come after the petition was granted. And so this question is before he fulfilled his settlement duties. If you look at our land patent, first patents, you notice there's an awful lot of land patents that were given, and I'm not sure the date, 1848. And that's because in that time, they only had so much time to fulfill those settlements or they would lose the land. In the case of this, I would highly recommend you get the township papers for that township. And when you're dealing with Dawn and that, you also need to look at the borders with Euphemia and as well. And because it predates the land registry office, there won't be resources there. And I've had really good luck because a lot of the records in the township papers predate the registry office records.
One of the questions too was about the amount of land, and I looked in several sources and could not find this specific list, but I did not get to the library. I don't know whether any of you know the book by Glenn, if it's Stott or Stott, S-T-O-T-T, from London, Middlesex, and it would be, you're coming in the door, you're going straight to the back, just slightly to the left over where the military information is for your loyalists in your War of 1812, and I'm not sure if he would have it in there, but I have in general terms this statement. Grants to loyalists, refugees were generally 100 acres to a head of family and an additional 50 acres for each child or dependent. Men who fought with the various loyalist corps were entitled to 200 acres for a private, rising from there up to 5,000 acres for a field officer. Of course, some evidence of their service was necessary for approval. The Upper Canada land petitions can often reveal good genealogical information about these men. And if you're interested, I've got 10 different steps and pieces of paperwork that somebody had to complete to fill that out. And of course, we talked about the fact that they had to have built a dwelling on it, they had to have improved the land within, I did not find the number of years. Do you remember the number of years?
I don't know, I just know that 1848 is when I said, do it.
Or it's gone. Yeah. Anything else regarding?
Some of the land obligations prior to 1820 seemed to be people who weren't living, I was looking at the settlement along the river here, people who didn't necessarily come and live on their grant could hire somebody to do it. In the case of the landlord and Sally Yates affair, where she was given an Indian title to a huge chunk of property, and the landlord just kept stalling. They wanted to parcel it out, and they finally, she had permission from Governor Simcoe, but the landlord eventually waited until he went back to England and they parceled it out. So there's a lot of, it's favoritisms happening, but they seem to get 100 acres, 200 acres, and then some people get larger sums. And if you read Valley of the Lower Thames by Fred Point Hamill, you will get the preliminary people who settled on the river here in the townships. They'll refer to first township, second township, which is usually Dover, Raleigh, Chatham, Howard, Harwich, and they Camden, I guess, Camden. Sometimes they go into Dawn, just a little bit. So those are your primer books for starting to look at the county through the research. And in the case of Joseph Wheatley, I do believe I actually saw it in that early book, which hasn't really been indexed yet, that I was on. It's coming.
In fact, in more general terms, of course, there's romantic Kent as well. And in,
Obviously, yeah.
okay, thank you.
I would go my research these days, look to Hamill
Directly to Hamill.
and then see what Victor Morrison says in romantic Kent. So you kind of do it 1, 2. Hamill actually refers to the Burton papers,
Oh, yes.
which are in Detroit, which are their published forms. So you want to look at the Burton papers.
Yes, good idea. And again, our favorite Bible, chapter 8, Brenda Bickle Merriman, chapter 8 talks about settlement, immigration, naturalization, just in general terms, just so you get an idea. Anything else about the settlement?
I was talking about Philip Cofield, who settled on lot 172 out in Tilbury East. Well, in romantic camp, Richard Lawrenson mentions the two people that settled on either side of him, but does not mention him. So it's like beers, you take it and, you just work at it and improve it. Yes, and also, yes, Tilbury West. Yeah, Tilbury West was part of it. Yeah, so borders are important factor. The other factor that some people don't seem to twig into in Kent County is that we have two rivers running through Kent County. And so if they're in Dover Township, all they had to do is paddle, and some of the children used to go to school. I don't know whether they went from Raleigh to Dover or Dover to Raleigh. Church people, weddings, I mean, if you look always look at the adjoining townships. And the Camden and Howard are the same thing. They just went back and forth. In fact, we were talking the other day about the fords in the Sydenham River. And I remember being able, at certain times of the year, being able to walk right across that river. They used to drive cars across that river in the ford spots. So, you can't limit yourself just to the exact place that the person you're researching lived. You need to look at the other places. And another thing about marriages is people from Kent County went across the Sydenham and the Detroit River to marry as well. And I have one of those who did stay in Michigan. I have one who I found in a newspaper, it was a newspaper thing again, where they were going to go across the river and get married. But the border guy decided that there was something going on and they looked a little too young. So he sends them back to Essex County and would not let them go to Detroit to get married.
I introduced them, there's at the very bottom, it says wills. Where can Kent County wills be located?
Well, the wills will be at the Ontario Archives. Now, there were individual, as we said, there are wills within some of the land records. And the thing to know about the wills in the land records is they aren't always registered when the person died. I found one that was registered like 60 years later, and I almost discounted it. So that's the thing about the wills with the land registry. You need to look at adjoining grants and plots and see if there was a will there. And the wills used to be at the registry office. You could actually go and pull them out, and they're not there anymore. We do have in the library transcription of the grantors and the grantees of the wills that were at the registry office. And I'm not really, we used to have wills locally as well at the surrogate court, I think, here, and I really don't know. That's one of the things I'm going to be trying to update is our tracing your ancestors in Kent County. And so that's a question I have to ask, where are those wills now?
And Dawn again mentioned the Archives of Ontario, and they do again have a detailed pathfinder if you haven't gone in and checked. But they also tell you where the wills are going to be and how to find them before certain dates. They give you, pages I'm looking for here. They give you the names of all the courthouses for the different counties and their addresses and phone numbers so that you can contact them directly because they would have the actual ones located in their particular facilities if you wanted to make arrangements to go and see the actual file itself. I would draw your attention, and I mean, I'm not pushing OGS books, but I don't know if you're aware, we had an arrangement with Dundurn Press at one time and did some books together, and we didn't have the big seller, so we are not making lots of money on those. And then we've decided to, do away with our agreement. And if you were reading our newsletters recently, over the last spring and summer, you'll know that we're selling these books for $5 a piece now. So like this one, which is called Inheritance in Ontario by Jane McNamara. Again, you can get it online in the e-store or order it through the store. You can order things about military, called The Colors by Janice that's by Kenneth Cox. York Sacrifice by Janice Nickerson. Again, all things that are related to the kinds of topics we're talking about tonight. This one There's also a Dundurn book, A Better Place, Death and Burial in 19th Century Ontario, if that's of interest to you. So, this is a good time to maybe add to your collection if you weren't so inclined to do so. But, one of your first go-to places should be Ontario Archives, because their website can direct you to a lot of places that will have the kinds of information that you're looking for as far as the wills go.
Question 7. Which of these types of storage are people using, i.e. flash thumb drives or memory cards or even external drives, pros and cons?
Well, first, I don't know about the cons. I back up to my computer to an external drive at home. I've used a ClickIt, or I've used another one, and there's a utility on your computer. You can just back it up. That one I keep off site. That one I go and get and bring it in and back it up. If you read any of Dick Eastman's newsletters, you'll know he says at the first of the month, back up your files. So I also use flash drives. They're really handy if you're trying to organize files. I copied a bunch of pictures, and one of the things I'm going to do, I sit at night, is go through and rename them and that. But this is the best little thing that I've got. It's a verbatim external drive. It's in my purse. Everywhere I go, it goes. I think it's a terabyte, and it's just excellent. I've got a little case here, and I've got a little pocket, my phone pocket in my purse, but my drive goes in this. So all the really, my genealogical program, all that, I do back up to the other external drive. This is the one I carry in my pocket, and it's got important files on it. So,
Mine is in my safety deposit box. I'm afraid it will fall in my purse. You mentioned Dick Eastman. I'm also going to mention Thomas McKenzie. How many know Thomas McKenzie? Okay, you need to pay attention to some things Thomas McKenzie is doing nowadays too, because he's another guru, self-made guru, but I don't care how they get made. If they've got information, I'll take them. And he talks about the triple play, using all kinds of backup. So, you're going to put it, back it up in another place on your computer. You're going to back it up on an external hard drive of some kind. You're going to back it up in the cloud. How many have things backed up in the cloud? How many don't have any idea what the cloud is? They keep hearing people talk about it. You don't have any idea, or you don't care anymore. The pros and cons of a lot of this is that no matter how you back it up, how many used to use CDs to back it up? Oh, yeah, the 3 or the 5-inch floppies. Then we went 3.5-inch floppies. Then we went CDs, DVDs. It all went on there. Then all of a sudden there's a flash drive, this little thumb drive. Okay. It was all kind of storing it in the same format. And then we went to, the terabyte external hard drives, and we can put things in the cloud. How many have heard the term Dropbox? Okay, and I use Dropbox as well. Everybody I know got an invitation to join Dropbox for free, because every time they joined Dropbox for free, I got so many mega whatevers of space. And so I've got everything I own on there, everything to do with the OGS board I've got in there. I've got my personal family history in there. I've got all my personal files of any nature that are in there. But that's not owned by someone, because if that company ever goes out of business, then I'm not the crick, right? So the triple play, you want things in 2 or 3 different places. And the minute that some file changes, okay, here's my really sad story, and Cindy's husband tried to help me one time. Back in my younger years, I was going to scan every archival photograph I had, and I became the keeper of the family albums for all our families, so thousands of pictures. I've seen so many like, yeah. I was a little elementary school teacher at the time. We talked big pets. I scanned them all as big pets. You know what that means, Rose? That when I increase the size of them, I get all these little checkerboard pictures. So what I needed to do was now either rescan them or somehow change bitmaps into JPEGs or TIFFs, or heaven only knows what the next thing will be. So that's the problem. Is not so much is the problem what you store it on. But if the file formats change, how many have your family tree maker, whatever, on some other device, and you can't even copy it now from that device to something new? you've got to keep up with the technology, is the biggest problem. I remember triple play, back up regularly and keep to date with the technology. If you have all these people who've been forced to use Office 365, they've got to be in the cloud storage. If you even just go in and Google, online storage or in the cloud storage or whatever, you'll get all kinds of information. And some of it's free to a certain point, and then some of it costs something. But how important and valuable is that stuff to you? Because I'd rather pay a little now than paying thousands of hours later with having to try and redo something. So to pass it this way, first, anybody's got anything to say?
I'm a skeptic, I still use paper backups.
I forgot to mention paper, I have paper of almost everything too, but that, I would not live with just paper. But, anyway.
Depending on what kind of computer you have, the company may give you, I have an Asus, and they give me 1,000 gigabytes of memory, which for most of my stuff will take care of it. So that's one other place where you may be able to back up your files to.
I was mentioning Thomas McKenzie, and how many follow blogs? I thought so, but I just thought I'd mention this to you. I'm one of those people who knows what the delete key is, and I use it regularly. But I have subscribed to Thomas McKenzie's blog because he sends out notices about things that are free. He sends out notices when, for example, you can get online and search certain sets of records and certain paid subscription sites for free over certain weekends. You can get free books. I went online, for example, and during a certain period, I was able to download Preserving Your Family Oral History and Stories for free. If I also downloaded a Kindle Reader for my computer for free, I wanted to bring it and show it to you, but I'm doing a workshop presentation in Windsor on Sunday, and I was afraid with my luck something would go wrong with my computer. So, I also have a paper copy of one of them. Another one is called After You're Gone, Future-Proofing Your Genealogy Research. And these are still available on Amazon.ca, but they're not free right now, unless you're a member or a subscriber. They're $3.65 if you download them online. If you want them, I got one of them here in print and it was $16. So it sounds like a lot, but if the information in there is worth $16 to you, then it's here for you to take a quick look at too. Pulling the food and we better talk fast.
Question 8, what are some local resources family historians may not be aware of, i.e. newspaper indexes at the CK Library, CK Cemetery projects, etc.?
Just gonna, no, I know. I know. At the library, we have the indexes for the birth, marriage, and deaths. The old ones we used to have to use to look up the birth, marriage, and deaths. You look them up at the library, and you get them all written down, and then you go to the LBS and look at the films. Those indexes are still useful because when you go on Ancestry and you look at some of that stuff, first of all, transcription may not be right, and of course, the indexes were transcribed when they were in the IGI, I believe. And, is that right? Yeah, International Genealogical Institute. Some of them may have been, not our local ones, I guess they had to be submitted to be in there. And so it's still, I would say, saving time if you can come up. And if you're looking, you know, they got married in 1882. You know, if it's, I had one where it's the D that may have been transcribed in answer as L. Or I had one S and it was transcribed as L. And so the thing to bear in mind is that a lot of these things that are indexed are done offshore. So they do not get those names right. I found one the other day and it was supposed to be Downey and it came out Danny and things like that. So sometimes go back to those old indexes and it can save you time and frustration.
One resource that really isn't totally available to the public, but it is in there. Just once I was released of my bondage from Camp Ranch, newsletter. I'm volunteering at the county museum, Chatham County Museum, and as I'm going through things, I'm looking at the old index books as people donated things over the 50 years, 60 years that the museum has been here as a county museum. And I'm slowly, for the items I'm working with as a volunteer, I'm also watching for genealogical things. I couldn't find my list tonight before I came here. It's probably at the museum. But I'm noting family Bibles that have been donated to the museum collection. And they are in there, and there are families, and in some cases they will say that they have pages, births, deaths, and marriages. So I'm hoping as time goes on, I'll be able to just make a little article so you can actually say, this is in the museum. There's catalog numbers they gave it. So that should you go to the museum and this family is of interest to you, and you're armed with a catalog number, they should be able to look it up with ample warning. They can maybe not do it because the staff is, museums are like libraries, right? It's the first place they get cut is the staff. And it's not deemed by the bureaucracy as that valuable, but there are items there that are worth looking at. So that would be one I would mention, is local museums. You tend to forget about that.
You have to be specific what you ask for though, because I know
Very.
I was taking a course, surprise, and I wanted to know what they had there. Well, she said, well, what are you looking for? Yeah. So if they don't have to throw in a list or an index or a catalog yet of what they have, you have to know what you're looking for.
Additional questions, Dix, or anything else to share?
From working with seniors, I tend to shout. Just a few things that kind of touch a little bit on a few of the questions that we had. I don't have family here, so my research is a lot of around the Ottawa area in Northern Ontario, Quebec. I've been doing research for my neighbor out at the campground, and his name is very French. And I did one side of the family, and we did pretty well. There were not too many family stories that were out to lunch. But you have to remember in this area about that silly border between Windsor and Detroit. It is so important. And remember that Detroit began as a French fort. And a lot of people came from Quebec, and they were definitely very French. And I spent, I bet you, a good 6 months looking for Philip Laforge and Mary White, his wife, in Detroit, born in Detroit. Couldn't find this man and this Mary White anywhere. And of course, Laforge bastardized every which way you can think of that you might be able to spell this name. But I thought he's got to exist somewhere. Then I find St. Anne's Church, the old church in Detroit, some records. 2 of their children are born there, to Philip and Mary White. Well, you got to be somewhere, Philip. Philip didn't exist because Philip's name was Felix. And Mary White did not exist because her name was Marie Leblanc. So you have to remember that when you're looking, just because they translated the name from French to English, that was not the legal name. And I'm looking for 2 people who essentially didn't exist, which I finally found about a month ago. I couldn't believe it. I'm screaming at my son out in the living room. I knew this lady was Marie LeBlanc, but I needed proof. So, and I did find it at St. Anne's Church. So they must have changed priests at some point. And the one priest anglicized the names, and the other one, it was early on in the early 1800s. So, you know, remember, number 1, the border, because they say they're getting married at Assumption in Michigan, or they're at St. Anne's in Canada. And they're all over the place. And these people all ended up here, not all of them, but some of the children ended up here in Wallaceburg, Dover, Tilbury. So that's what the connection was. But two of the boys in Wallaceburg married in St. Clair Township in Michigan. They used to go over there to get married. Two boys married two sisters in 2 different years. So remember that silly border and remember the French names. Remember, if you don't know French, ask somebody who does, how would you translate this if it was French? Because that may be why you can't find them.
That's right, yeah. Oh, just one more thing. Someone said about the French names. Well, the anglicizing of the French names, that is not necessarily a real old thing. I work for the Board of Education, and I was at the board office in Eugene with school records, and it would be in the 1960s. There was also changes, so don't assume that the name has stayed the same from 1900 and that, especially when it is in another nationality, they may have changed. One of the things I did at school was the meaning of names. For instance, Speck means shoemaker. So things can get changed, and then same with some of the French. You know, Roy is king. I don't pronounce Roy right, but you know, things like that. So, you know, take that into account. Names can change within our lifetime.
Pronunciation too.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to advertise the two registration, division, and George building sign-up sheets.
I don't think you brought them here tonight. George.
Because somebody can sign up tomorrow. The library are
Yeah.
I just thought it would be because they had all.
Yeah. We didn't think about it. We didn't bring the calendar either. Before we go to break, I'd like you to remember our name here. This is for a this is for a $5 Jimmy Hortons card for being volunteers of the month for our Kent branch.
There you go. I almost had you draw the name and you would have got it.
Oh, I put it back in.
Oh, yeah, we are usually Diana put some great ones on for the year and then we pull them all back. Oh, okay. So you don't get it twice. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. I hope that our questions were informative with the answers. And please feel free to have a little social with us now with coffee and tea and so on.